Hi, my name is Bekah Walker, and I'm a teacher at the Rock Academy here in San Diego. I am teaching a 7th grade life science class, a sophomore biology class, and then 2 sections of an honors anatomy and physiology elective at the school. My research study that I'm proposing is a study among my biology students, and it's came from the my observations of a lack of motivation to read and difficulty comprehending science text in that class. It has to do with our textbook, which I have a picture of there by Prentice Hall. They have stated that it's too confusing, it's really difficult to read and to extract information from. And at times when I've given reading assignments, only 50% of the class has completed them. So definitely there's a lack of motivation to learn through reading. And this doesn't sit well with me as a teacher because reading is a valuable way that we can gain information, especially as we move in and out of the classroom. As our national and state goals that we have in education, there's a huge literacy component there where students should be able to read different scientific text, evaluate it, and allow it to inform decisions that they have to make that are relevant to their lives. So the kind of ideas that the study came from was the idea that science is a crucial content area. It's very relevant to our everyday lives, and so literacy is very important. A student should be able to read and articulate themselves using scientific language, and reading is a huge start in that kind of knowledge process and to make meaning. And so the purpose of my study is to explore how a specific strategy, the question-answer relationship strategy, affects scientific literacy and achievement in my secondary level biology students. So I'm really curious to see how this specific intervention can alter their motivation to read and their ease with what they read and their comprehension. I chose question-answer relationship strategy because it's been proven as a general reading comprehension strategy, and I'm curious to see if it's effective in my secondary science classroom. So what I like about this strategy is that it teaches students how to think about their thinking while they're reading. So it starts by asking them questions that are really easy to find, that are in the book. They're right there in front of them, and typically these are the questions that my students will answer pretty readily. Those would be the in-the-book questions. There's right there, which are pretty obvious, like they use the same language as the question that's seen in the book, and then the think and search questions, which are ones that maybe it's not quite as easy to find, but the answer is still there in the text. This is contrasted with kind of higher level thinking questions where students are relying on their prior knowledge to form opinions or ideas, or perhaps they have to evaluate information and draw conclusions or make predictions, which I like how this really corresponds with Bloom's taxonomy and all levels of the taxonomy, from recalling information up to synthesizing information, is represented in this question strategy. So students are then going to be able to analyze the questions that I'm giving them during their reading assignments as well as on assessments, and figure out, okay, where am I supposed to be able to locate this information? And my hope is that they'll be able to then take this strategy and apply it to other text and maybe make it a little bit easier for them to understand and to read, and increasing their achievement in literacy. So my first research question is, what is the effect of the question-answer relationship strategy on science achievement? And my second research question is going to be talking more about, or measuring more of, students' self-reported perceptions of their scientific literacy, both before working with the strategy and after working with the strategy. So did they think that they became more literate from learning the strategy and analyzing the text? So in reviewing the literature, to start, I just wanted to focus on how scientific literacy is an important goal that we see at the national and state level. It's in the National Science Education Standards, in the new framework for K through 12 science education, the Next Generation Science Standards, and the Common Core State Standards, with which California recently adopted. And so students should be able to read and understand scientific texts. They should be able to summarize ideas and evaluate conclusions. They should be able to engage in public discussion on topics related to science and engineering and technology. They should be informed consumers on scientific and technological information. They should be able to have the skills to continue to learn about science outside of school, and the confidence to enter into careers, including those of science, engineering, and technology. I also did some research on reading comprehension, and reading strategies and comprehension are taught to students at a young age, but generally speaking, it's limited. This literacy instruction is limited once you get into the secondary classroom besides English. So in content areas such as social science or science, math, we don't have as much explicit instruction on how to read those kinds of textbooks. But I think that's really important, and research has shown that students need to be taught explicit strategies in how to approach these specific content area textbooks and make meaning of the information. It's also been shown that reading strategies lead to improved comprehension and achievement. So I've specifically chosen the question-answer relationship strategy to assist students in seeing the relationships between the questions that are posed and the answers then that they are going to generate. Research has shown that this strategy is effective in improving reading comprehension in both the primary and secondary classrooms. And it's helpful because students, as I said before, are able to learn how to differentiate where answers should be located, either in the book or in their head. And so this will set them up to really be able to answer questions more comfortably and confidently, because they know either they're going to look in the book or they have to rely on their prior knowledge and make an inference. So helping them to understand how to interpret questions and then activate and think about how they're going to think to respond to those questions is kind of the goal of the strategy. So moving into my methodology, right now, like I said, the students have a lack of motivation to read. They have difficulty understanding and applying information from texts that I've given them. These students are in a biology class at a private school in an urban area of San Diego. There's 22 students in the class, 12 males and 10 females. 4 of these students are English learners. 2 of them really limited in their scope of English. In fact, currently they are not passing the class due to their low level of English. The other 2 have been in the United States and in the education system for now. This is their second year, so their English is at a level where they're able to understand and make meaning from the text pretty well. I also have 5 students who are in our Learning Differences program, and they receive an extra period in the day where they're in this classroom with a special education teacher, getting extra study materials, support, tutoring, and study skills that are going to allow and help them to succeed in their general education classes. So this study will span an 8-week period, and the intervention being to introduce and practice using the reading strategy. The first 2 weeks of the period, I'm going to collect baseline data. So we'll begin with giving weekly comprehension assessments after reading the text. So that will happen for 2 weeks. We'll get the scores for those tests. And then in week 3, I'll go ahead and introduce the strategy. During weeks 3 through 8, I'll collect more weekly data from those comprehension assessments that we administer after reading the text. And these assessments are going to be generated by myself to include questions that span all levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So it will be similar to the questions that they use during their strategy, where some of them will be right there in the book. Others they'll have to generate using their prior knowledge or connecting with adding their opinions to what they've read in the book. So it'll span all levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And each of the assessments will be the same length. However, there'll be a little bit of variation in the questions, obviously because the text is going to be different that they're reading each week. I'll also be comparing chapter and unit test scores from the quarter before the intervention starts and the scores that are collected during and after the intervention. My qualitative data is going to be collected through a survey that I will give twice. Once at the beginning before the intervention, where I am going to ask students to rate their perceived scientific literacy, their motivation to read, and how difficult they think the textbook is. I'll also allow room, not only instead of rating their perceptions, but also to be able to add short answer responses and their attitudes and perceptions. So I'll compare that at the beginning and at the end of the study to see how that's changed. To introduce the intervention, there's two parts. First, I'll be able to model the question-answer relationship strategy by showing pre-generated questions that they'll use when they are doing the reading assignment. Some will be given before the reading, some during, some after, and then students will move on to generating their own questions where they'll have to write their questions, think and search, author and me on my own. So they're going to be making meaning and practicing generating these questions as we go through and learn how to use the strategy in class. To analyze the data, the qualitative analysis will be measuring how students' perceptions have changed from the start before the intervention to after. So this will be from the surveys, and I'll look at their comments and classify them as either having low, medium, or high confidence in their literacy level. Their motivation to read will also be high, medium, low, and then the difficulty of the textbook, again, it's very difficult, average, or it's easy to understand, and we'll compare to see how those change both before and after the intervention. The quantitative comparison of mean scores for both the weekly reading comprehension assessments and the chapter and unit test scores will help me to measure how the student achievement is affected by the intervention. So are they scoring and performing better on quizzes, assessments, and tests? So we'll look at those mean scores to see if there's any change. The intervention and assessments that are used in the study are very standard classroom procedures. Students, by being enrolled in the class, are expected to participate in the activities. So this is a normal activity. And I'll protect students' identities by removing their names from assessments and surveys that are collected and used in the study. My study is very limited because of the study size. It's a very small population and it's very specific. So my results will not be able to be generalized to a larger or different classroom population. There's going to be variation in the text samples. So because the text that they read every week during the study is going to be different, students may then score better on the assessments one week than on other weeks due to the difficulty of the text, their interest in it, or their prior knowledge that they already have. So that variation is can impact my results. And then there's just obvious differences among students. They have different academic abilities, motivational levels, learning styles, and of course unforeseen absences may get in the way as far as tracking their progress and whether or not the intervention made a difference and impacted their achievement and literacy. So I'll have to look for outliers that may need to be removed during my analysis to have more accurate analysis of my results. Overall, I'm excited to see if the strategy is effective in motivating my students and giving them some of the skills that they need to become better readers who can make meaning of scientific texts. So thank you for listening, and I hope you guys are having a great day.